This is the story of the captain who slept through the alarm. The year is 1970. The place, East Germany. The mission, top secret. A Soviet fighter jet is flying over West Berlin. As it reaches its destination, the pilot is supposed to drop some agents off and then return to base. But as the plane approaches its target, things go terribly wrong. The jet crashes into the ground and explodes. Luckily, one of the two pilots manages to eject just in time. He's taken to the hospital with serious injuries, but he's alive. And when the doctors ask him what happened, his response is, "I don't know. The captain fell asleep at the controls. The other pilot is dead and there are no other survivors." So the military court wants to know exactly what happened on that fateful flight, and they have a few theories. Maybe the pilot forgot to set the autopilot. Maybe he got sick mid-flight. Or maybe, just maybe, he really did fall asleep. The pilot tells the investigators that he and the captain had been up late the night before finishing their flight plans. When they finally got to bed, he said, it must have been around 3 a.m. They were woken up at 6 a.m. for their 7 a.m. flight. I recall both of us being very tired, the pilot says. Once they got to the plane, they ran through their pre-flight checks. Then the captain turned on the autopilot, set the course, and said, "Take the controls. I need to rest." The first officer protested, saying that he was uncomfortable with the plan and that he wanted to wait until they were closer to Berlin to turn on the autopilot. The captain insisted. "Don't worry. I'll wake up before we get there." So the first officer took the controls and they took off. For a while, everything was fine. Then about 20 minutes into the flight, the first officer felt something strange. The plane was shaking. He checked the instruments and realized that they were dangerously low on fuel. He turned to the captain and shook him awake. "Wake up, you asleep?" The captain opened one eye and grunted. "What?" The first officer repeated himself, and the captain slowly began to stir. That's when the first officer noticed something terrible. The captain's eyes were glazed over and unfocused. He looked like a zombie. The captain seemed to be coming out of a deep sleep. "How long was I asleep?" he asked groggily. "We're asleep for 20 minutes, the first officer replied. "I tried to wake you up 5 minutes ago, but you didn't seem to hear me." The captain's eyes snapped open. He immediately started yelling at the first officer. "Are you crazy? Why didn't you wake me up sooner? We're going to crash." Then he turned to the radio and in a panic started calling for help. But it was too late. The plane was out of fuel and they were plummeting toward the ground. The captain put the plane into autopilot mode, and both pilots put on their parachutes and jumped out. But the military investigators aren't buying this story. They think that the first officer is hiding something. Maybe he was having some kind of affair with the co-pilot's wife, and that's why the captain was so angry. Or maybe the first officer was the one who fell asleep, and he's covering for the captain. The investigators decide to run some tests. They hook the pilots up to a machine that measures eye movement and brain activity. They show them some images and ask them to describe what they see. They also ask them some simple questions to see if they're lying. But the results are inconclusive. Maybe the first officer really didn't wake up the captain, or maybe he did. With no other leads, the investigators decide to pay a visit to the captain's house. They search the house and find nothing. But as they're about to leave, they notice something strange. There are no curtains on the windows. The investigators go back to the lab and check the flight data. They discover that the plane was flying at a much lower altitude than it should have been. This means that the captain could have been blinded by the sun. Maybe he really did fall asleep, and the first officer really did try to wake him up. In the end, the mystery is never solved. The official report simply states that the cause of the crash is unknown, but you can decide for yourself. What do you think happened? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great stories.